Okay, so this is a spreadsheet of our current budget outlay, and um, throughout it there are notes that will show you, like here, for example, that you can click on that shows you how I arrived at certain calculations. I will send a separate spreadsheet and a separate document that describes more in detail some of these notes. But to start out, we're going to go over the salaries and the basis for the salaries, and then we'll move on down the spreadsheet until we get to our end of year budget. Okay, so starting out with a base salary formula for full-time employees is the average salary that's determined from research on any of the available um, websites for average salaries for Beijing, and then a premium, a bonus is added for being bilingual, and then a housing allowance is added, and then all of that is added together, and then it's divided by 12 for the monthly base. So that's the basic formula moving forward. But let's describe some of these in detail. So I'm going to start with a psychologist's salary. And there's a reason for that, and I can get back to that later. So the average annual salary for a clinical psychologist in China is 159,477 yuan. I added a 35% premium on this salary because I would expect to hire a psychologist who's fully bilingual. Finally, I considered the monthly range of costs for renting a 3-bedroom apartment in Beijing, which is roughly between 6,000 and 13,000. And I have available resources, citations that you can check that. Using a midpoint at 9,500 yuan, I arrived at a total annual cost of 114,000, and therefore the housing costs are over 50% of the base salary. Taking this into account, I assume that the existing fringe rate does not include housing. So there's a fringe rate here of 35%. I'm assuming that that doesn't include housing or a housing allowance. And I decided that we could cover at least 50% of housing costs. And I thought 100% coverage would be an unprecedented move for an educational administrative job at BNU, and thus might cause pushback from superiors governing the higher tier budget. Thus, the monthly base arrived at is 22,691, as you can see. And here, I have the formula for it. And then there's the basic links. So once again, the basic formula for all of these is the average annual salary based on whatever median salary from different sources. Like for example, here is from salaryexpert.com, and cost of living or housing is from numbeo.com, etc. And then I take that and add a 35% bonus or premium for their salary because they're bilingual, and the extra education I think is worthy of additional money. And I add a housing allowance to cover half of their housing costs. And I divide all that by 12. And I did that for the psychologist, and I did that for the data analyst as well. Now, so I told you I was going to get back to the psychologist. So, I'm sorry, for the director. So the director's salary, as you can see, is the highest. And that wasn't without some manipulation. So let me go over the explanation for the director's salary. So the average salary for a dean of student services in Beijing, China is 128,000 yuan. Because I could not find data for the title of Director of International Student Services. This salary data is used as a proxy. I added 35% premium, which brought it up amount. It disappeared there. And because I would expect to hire, same situation because they're bilingual. And then we have the apartment costs. Okay, so we went through all the same type formulas. And then in the end, I arrived at a monthly base salary of $19,203. Well, that's less than the salary of the psychologist and the data analyst. And my rationale is that the director of the organization shouldn't be making less than his or her subordinates. So, and I wrote that here. So I changed the salary. It had it based on rather the highest paid subordinate, and the highest paid subordinate in this case would be the psychologist. I'm sorry, would be the data analyst. And I took that and decided to add an extra 15%. And so the formula that's different for the director of international student services, support services, is that it's 115% of the highest paid subordinate. So in the end, the director's salary is kind of based on the highest paid and subordinate salary. So I think I've repeated that enough that you get where I got my information from. And so this is how I arrived at the three total top figures here. Now you have an FTE of 1. The way I conceive FTE in this spreadsheet might be different from other spreadsheets, in that I'm considering a full-time employee as someone who's going to be working 12 months. And so one FTE would be 12 months of full-time employment, 40 hours a week or more. Whereas some of the other positions down here are 0.75, and that's mean that I'm only expecting them to work 9 months out of the year, because the typical fall and spring semester, where most students are here and where most students are going to need support for, and school, and because school is out during the summer, I don't think I should have to. Our organization would need to pay them for those 3 months that are off. So this isn't to say that we think it would be a good idea to just pay someone for 9 months and then not pay them for 3 months. This is more to clarify that they're not that the monthly amount here could be attributed to 9 months of employment. However, if you would like to think of it of them getting paid 12 months, as we would prefer that they would, then this 60,750 will be distributed for between 12 months. However, their total salary was calculated based on the presumption that they'll only be, based on the fact that they'll only be working 9 months. So in that sense, they made a lower salary. And we can have employees decide, hey, do you want to be paid based on a 9-month scale or a 12-month scale? Either way, their total salary is not going to change. However, the basis for the calculation of their salary is on 9-month employment. Okay. So down here we have, in the other personnel section, we have postdoctoral associates. And postdocs are the postdocs are going to be helping out the data analyst. And as you can see, the data analyst was the highest paid employee prior to my calculation for the Director of International Student Services, being 115% of the highest paid employee, because of the quantitative background and based on figures on how much statisticians with a graduate level education make. And so these are postdocs, and the way I see it is that postdocs are being paid not just with money, but they're being paid with experience as well. And that experience is valuable, and so we don't need to pay them. And of course, we shouldn't pay them as much as someone who has more experience and they're already fully into their profession. So postdoc employees make 50% of what the data analysts would make, plus a 3,000 UN living allowance, because Beijing rent is pretty expensive. And then we have graduate students, and we're going to have 4 of those, yet just 2 FTE, which means that they're not going to be working full time. So it'd be like 4 students working half time. And all right, so we get to our desktop computers. And so it's a new office. We need new computers. They don't have to be top-of-the-line computers. I presented my calculations for that here. I'll include that in a separate document. But as you can see, the average price for a computer is $4,500. I multiply that times 13 employees. With 13 staff, the receptionists, they will share a computer, for example, so they're not counted twice. Here's the prices and rationale for that. And copiers and phones, same price. I have the prices and rationale. And these are priced using local vendors, so you don't have to worry about like shipping costs like from the U.S. Which is good because as you know, a lot of electronics, as many know, a lot of electronics are made in China. The materials and supplies, it's based on 1,800 students times 50 times 1%. Sorry, it's times 10, 1/10 of the yuan, and around 1,800 students, 50 pages per student at 0.1 yuan per page. And then extra 2,000 yuan for odd and end stationery and office tools. For example, staplers, scissors, and binders. All right, so we get down to our annual reserve. Oh, this is a big cost here. I need to mention that. So the consultant services. So our first year, we don't want to run into problems from not properly hurdles that could arise that we can avoid just by learning about people who've had similar experiences creating an organization or running a student support services organization. So we're going to want consultation from outside services, from professionals who've had a background working in student services. Perhaps there's some sort of non-compete agreement or something with the current university staff at other schools, so we wouldn't choose those, but we will try to seek out a consultant who could help us organize our business or our organization in such a way that we could minimize the likelihood of pitfalls and setbacks. And the average salary for an educational consultant in Beijing is 18,711. We probably won't need them for a full 12 months. So this is the assumption that we'll have multiple consultants and that we wouldn't go beyond the range of a consultant who's paid the average wage for salary for 1 year. All right, our annual reserve expenditure is 0.5%, so 5% for the first year, and the rest of the amounts are pretty clear. And for our discretionary fund, it's also a 5%. Go here, make sure. And the discretionary fund is just to help our organization stay liquid, making sure we have cash on hand that we can do things with that isn't already tied to other expenses such as salary, or other recurring costs, and that's important. The annual reserve, on the other hand, is it's more like sort of a rainy day fund, just in case something happens that school shuts down, something where we have to continue to pay some sort of minimal salary based on the contracts in those emergency situations. And so that for the first year, you see we have we can afford to allocate 5%. And throughout our various allocations, we come at a zero total for the first year.